In 3, 2. All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Anmol Oberoi. Anmol, how's it going?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thanks for asking. I wanted to ask, let's jump into it. Tell us a little bit about your past, your present. How did you get to where you are today? What are you doing?
Sure, absolutely. Now, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here. Excited to share my journey and really how we got to where we are. So yeah, really, just to tell you a little bit about the backstory, I'll take a step back and tell you how we got here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a very close relative of mine who runs a dental practice. And every time I would meet him, I would ask him that, hey, what's the biggest challenge that you face, right? And he would tell me the biggest challenge he faces is acquiring new patients. And me coming from marketing background would always laugh it off and say that, hey, that shouldn't be the challenge. That should really be the goal of the practice, right? You got to keep acquiring new patients, just like any business wants to keep acquiring new customers. And that's when he told me that it's easy for you to think this way, but at dental schools, we're not taught marketing or business, right?
Mm-hmm.
All we are taught is how to provide great oral healthcare. So everything that I'm doing as a business owner now is very difficult for me. I don't know business. I don't know marketing, right? After months of me, doing this, I thought, okay, let me spend some time, and I offered to help him, right? I told him that, why don't I help you?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see how things go. Spent about 6 months with him. The good news was that 6 months later, he started getting a lot more phone calls, right? So that was the good news. But unfortunately, the production did not grow in line with the number of incoming calls, right? And when we looked at numbers, he was surprised that, if we're getting so many phone calls, why isn't my production also growing in line with, revenues growing in line with the number of phone calls? And he always thought that maybe because it's marketing, that's not targeting the right set of people, right? But when we spent about a month, we realized the biggest reason for that was because most of these phones, right, which is 20 to 25% of these calls, were being missed or dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reasons could be multiple. Patients call after hours on weekends, or while teams were busy, the front desk team was busy on a claims call or with patients, right? So we realized that I felt like this is a big problem, right? Any business that functions on top of a phone call, this must be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But after spending some more time, I realized that it's not just the missed calls, right? There are so many other problems. The practices do not have an automated way via text message or via multi-channel to send reminders, to send reviews, right? Basically to reduce no-shows, to grow the number of reviews, to automatically follow up and bring back patients, right? Basically patient recall. So that's where really, me and my co-founder jumped in and decided that, hey, maybe we can bring a complete product for healthcare businesses like dental practices that will solve everything end to end and, help them automate a lot of their work. So that's really, in short, the journey and how we got here.
Gotcha. So you have a degree in marketing?
I don't have a degree in marketing. I have a degree in engineering, but, I would say going into multiple startups, I just got the opportunity to work in marketing, and luck would have it that I could ultimately use it for my relative as well.
Yeah, man, it's a really smart brain. So Emitrr, right, is what you decided to create?
Yep, absolutely.
Where's that name come from?
So that also has a small story. Now, we didn't start, the word, of course, talks about emitting sound, and we didn't start with the current product that we have, right? So we wanted to help solve the problem of missed calls first, and then solve other problems. And we thought that the solution for missed calls, I think we were too futuristic about solving this problem. We thought that over time, phone calls will move to Alexa and Google Home. People will start using Alexa and Google Home and start ordering for services, right? Booking appointments with doctors, ordering for a home service, etc. So we built a platform with which we went to doctors and said that, hey, you have presence on Alexa and Google Home now with our platform, and your patients can book an appointment. Of course, that didn't take off for obvious reasons. None of us use it for transactions. So that's where we started with the word Emitrr. But, of course, we didn't change the brand name because we already had customers. So just continued along with it.
Yeah. I mean, that will happen. I feel like that is going to happen eventually, like, right? Through voice transactions, people are going to be like, hey, Alexa, find me this, do that. I see it happening a little by little, but with smaller things, right? Like, hey, Alexa, go buy me some stuff, right? So that's interesting. So then Emitrr came out. how old is, if you don't mind me asking, Emitrr officially?
Sure. This is our fourth year.
Fourth year?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And there's something I really like, Anmol, that you guys are tackling. And I've talked about it on this podcast a lot, but I'm all about removing or minimizing as much as possible no-shows, right? And
Right.
I never thought about that there's so many missed calls or dropped calls. What did you said it was your cousin, right?
Yeah, my
Or
relative. Yes.
your relative. What did your relative say when he saw that? He's like, "What? But I have people up front." Or
Sure. So I'll tell you, there are two types of, really two types of customers, and my relatives falls within one of those cohorts, right?
Mhm.
There is one type of customer, as we typically call them, problem aware and solution aware, right? He wasn't even aware of the problem, right? So
Mhm.
some people, of course, are aware of the problem. Some people are not, right? When I realized that he's not even aware of the problem, the reason for that was because even today, most businesses use landline. So some research says that most healthcare practices today, to the tune of 90% or above, still use a landline, right? Now, when you use a landline, it's very rare you will log into a software and look at the metrics, right? So he wasn't even aware. He was just seeing calls come in, calls being picked up. What
Mhm.
was getting dropped, he was not even looking at those metrics, right? So for him, this was a completely new discovery. So that's the biggest reason. So the moment he discovered that, he realized the need to move to a voice over IP software, right? Because that gives you metrics, that gives you a lot more automation capabilities, right? So his first reaction was, all right, if I'm missing phone calls, then why am I missing phone calls? Let me just figure that out, right?
Mm.
And there's no reason, right? He didn't have any data. But over time, when we saw, the data was that patients were calling after hours, patients were calling on weekends. You have limited staff, right? And the moment you try to grow further, you basically cannot keep hiring and hiring, right? When he tried to grow, when we did marketing for him and he tried to grow, the phone started ringing a lot more. The front desk was busy with patients coming in office. The front desk was busy on another call. The front desk was busy calling patients for reminders, which is what led me to believe that, hey, the front desk is spending so much time on manual tasks instead of spending time on talking to patients, right? And that's why we said that one of the biggest reasons, of course, is that they're not aware. But another big reason is if you don't automate reminders, if you don't automate other things, follow-ups, when there's a no-show, if you don't automate those things, your front desk is going to spend time on these things instead of picking up phone calls, right? So those were largely the reasons, and that's when he realized the need of automation.
Gotcha. So Emitrr is kind of like, you know how somebody tries to put like a thing so nothing falls through the cracks, but then things are falling through the cracks. Emitrr is like another thing that says like, nope, I'm gonna grab those things that are falling through the cracks and put them back, right? Almost type of thing in the schedule.
Right. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. So then I was wondering, could you, because there's a lot of people who do this, they just outsource calls, right? If they're like, oh, we're missing them, could you just outsource it? But that even has bandwidth too, right? That has a limit.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, of course, some bigger businesses can afford to do that, right? And it works well for them. The two biggest reasons why customers come to us, of course, they don't just come for missed calls, right? They do come for the entire package, which is the complete patient interaction and engagement. But since you brought up the topic of missed calls, the reason why practices prefer to use texting when a call is missed and you want to automatically send a text is because you have control over the experience, right?
Mhm.
What we've learned is when you outsource it to answering services, now these answering services work with other practices, other healthcare practices, home service companies, retail businesses, etc. Right? So they are not specialized into dental, right? So you're really letting your first touch point of a lead or a patient go into the hands of a person who doesn't know your business, right? Which is why they said that, okay, at least in this case, I have access to the experience and I can text and take care of the experience from there. So it works really well for practices with one or two locations, because that is where the sweet spot is, or startup practices. Or it works really well when you're you know a massive practice, right? So for example, we work with one of the biggest DSOs today. um, the scale is so large, they miss so many phone calls that they cannot afford to outsource it, right? Because then they've
Mhm.
got to put like 100-man army behind it,
Yeah.
which just doesn't work.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So then, in your opinion, And I love the fact that you've worked with a relative, right? Throughout this process, you've seen the pain points, right, of what he's going through or what they're going through. What can a practice owner or a dentist do today to improve their marketing or their business?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, see, there are, as a local business, you can only go after so many people, right? Google searches are limited because basically only in that neighborhood will people search for dentist near me, orthodontist near me, etc. Right? So of course that's one channel. Facebook as a channel, I won't say drives a lot of inbound. It's good to engage, right? Google is probably one of the biggest channels for you to bring patients, right? That's what I learned. Of course, things might have changed a bit, but I saw Google works well. So you got to write content. You can have SEO. You can have ads, local search ads, and you can target them. But what I learned over time was that there is a limit to search ads, right? Over time, somebody will come. So let's suppose you are based out of Weehawken in New Jersey, and a Great Expressions opens an office there. Now you can't fight them in terms of budget, right? Because they'll come and outbid you in the search ads war, right? And there's no way you have so much budget to fight against them, right? So how do you survive? You got to think long term. And in long terms, organic is what plays out, right? So there are two ways to think about organic. One is content, and the other biggest thing is reviews, right? So if dentists who are starting out, my strongest suggestion would be run ad great to capture your audience, but think long term and build reviews, right, as a strategy for your marketing. The reason for that is, if you understand Google's algorithm, right, Google looks at multiple things before showing your practice when somebody searches for dentist near me. And one of the biggest thing is reviews. So how that works is, of course, there are multiple things, but Google algorithm sees that how many reviews you have, how recent they are. It just doesn't mean that maybe you have 500 reviews and someone has 300. There's still a chance that 300 reviews practice can rank above you, right? Because they are more recent. So reviews is one thing that I would say that practices should definitely focus on.
Yeah. How does it? So besides, I know a lot of the times we say, "Oh, you just got to ask. You just got to ask the patient," right? And I'm not even kidding, Anmol. As easy as that sounds, like I remember forgetting all the time, and I'm like, "Oopsies," oh well, we'll let them know next time they come back, or we'll send them a message. How does Emitrr kind of like help with that?
Sure. So my biggest learning is that when a patient has had a negative experience, you don't need to ask for a review. You'll automatically see it. But when they've had a great experience, which I'm assuming if you're doing a good job is probably 95% of the time, that's when you need to ask a review, right? If you understand the patient's journey, right? When they walk out of your dental practice, if you tell them that, hey, asking also you need to think about it carefully. How do you ask, right? If I'm walking out and you tell me, will you leave me a review? I'll say definitely, and I'll go home and I'll forget about it, right? Even if I remember, I've got to now go to Google, put an effort, search for your practice. Maybe there are 3 other practices with similar names. I'm confused. I'm like, okay, I'm not putting effort because there's no incentive for me, right? What we simply did is we just automated that by sending a text message out where you can completely customize it to the way you like, right? Do you want to send it 1 hour later, 1 day later? Do you want to change the message based on the visit type? Maybe it was a root canal. Maybe it was just a consultation visit, right? Maybe it was just a hygiene recall. You don't want to keep sending a review request to every patient who's already left a review, right? Yeah. So you need to think about your review strategy very deeply for you to be able to drive reviews and ultimately see the benefits of getting new patients, right? So ask, but automate. Do not manually ask is what I would say.
What have you seen in your experience from like the practices that are signed up with Emitrr, the ones you worked with? What's been the best review strategy almost?
I would say the best review strategy has been 1 hour, 1 day. That's the simple, we call it the 1 hour, 1 day review automation, right? 1 hour after the appointment, assuming the patient is at home, send them a text. 1 day after, send them a text, right? Of course, we take care of a lot of specifics. If it's multiple people in a family, you just send them one review. You do not want to, send them multiple messages and spam them. But that's really what's worked, right? And just to give you an example, one of our customers with 2 locations, right? They went from 22 reviews. So they had 10,000 patients and they did not have a review strategy, right, across these 2 locations. Their rating was, I think, 2.2 or 2.4 with 22 reviews. In 4 months of working with us, they're past 500 reviews now, right? And now they're a top ranked practice. So I would say that's what's worked the best, automating and sending it at the right time.
Man, how long have they been working with you in order to get to 500?
So now they are in their 8th month with us.
Oh man.
In the first 6 months, they had 500 reviews because they already had 10,000 patients. They were just not asking, right? And they were just not automating it. So that's why.
Yeah. And do you think it's best to have it like on Google or Yelp, these reviews?
I would simply, from first principles thinking, say go after Google, right? Because that's where 90% of the search happens. Very rarely would someone go to Yelp and search for a dental practice. People do. I don't mean to say they don't. But if you're putting effort, then put it in where most of the market is, right? Which is Google search is what I would suggest.
Yeah. I feel like Yelp, we use more restaurants and stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So from these next questions are just to get into the head of someone who isn't totally involved on the clinical side of dentistry, right?
Sure.
Where you're in their mouth every day. But what would you like to see, Anmol, more from a dentist?
So I think I've said this multiple times. If I had to consider myself, right, maybe I'm sounding too demanding, but I think the world is moving in that direction with the kind of customer experience you're getting with Amazon, Ubers of the world, right? I think what I would like to see is that if I compare these two industries, right, you have consumer internet businesses and consumer service businesses, right? And dentists fall into the category of consumer service businesses. If you look at consumer internet businesses, Amazon offers great customer support. It has so much automation, right? I can easily get access to things. But if I look at consumer services businesses, right, doctors, dentists, unfortunately, we are not there yet, right? But I am the same consumer who's buying, products from Amazon and taking services from doctors and dentists, right? So my expectation over time has changed. I expect a very similar experience, right? Very simple things. If I call a doctor or a dentist and they don't pick up, there's no patience today, right? In a digital world, I'll go and call someone else. So that's why what I would say and what I would expect is that if doctors and dentists can, leverage automation as much as possible to provide a similar experience that the same consumer is having with the internet companies, right? So that's what I would say dentists should focus on.
Gotcha. Provided that same experience kind of thing.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. And there's no reason why they shouldn't, right?
Yeah, you're right. There is no reason why. I feel like we can always do that too, right? Improve our experience for our patients, right. Little by little, right? One thing I want to kind of dive into a little bit is, and I'm going to put some links in the show notes below for everybody listening or watching, if you're watching this on YouTube too, because I feel like you guys have a lot that you can cover. And I know some of the listeners are probably like, okay, Emitrr, I'm going to look into that, but what is it exactly? So, I know there's a video there that you talk about some proven ways to acquire and retain patients while constantly keeping your schedule full. What are some of those proven ways?
Absolutely. So, I think about it in three, I would say, I break it down into three goals, right? If I had to understand what I understood by working with my relative was really there are just three goals that dentists should focus on. And then everything is a byproduct, right? So the three goals are you've got to make sure that you keep acquiring new customers, right? New patients. You keep your existing patient, you retain your existing patients, right? And three is you keep your schedule full because you pay your staff for every, you basically, if you let go of any empty slot, you lose money, right? If I had to think about it with these three goals, right? Keeping your schedule full, acquiring new patients and retaining, I would say, your existing patients. I would say the strategy that has worked the best is on the acquisition side is focusing on reviews and reputation strategy long-term, right? On keeping your, and on retaining and keeping your schedule full side, what's worked the best is focusing on reduction of no-shows, right? A lot of times people know that, I should have a low no-show rate, but they do not have a strategy to reach there, right? I'll give you a very simple example. of what we realized why no-shows were high, even though they had an automated reminder set up, right?
Mhm.
And I might be getting into a specific, I would say, workflow, but I'm sure the audience is going to listen to it and say, hey, I'm doing this as well, right? So
Yeah.
we got into an office and we asked them that, what's your no-show rate? And they said the no-show rate is north of 30%, right? And that's massive. And I asked them, why is that? And do you not have any automation in place? And they said, we do have automation in place. We do send reminders, but we still get no-shows. And I asked them that, why is that? They said, we don't have an answer why, right? We looked at it in depth. They would send, so what they were doing is they were using their practice management software to send a reminder.
Mhm.
And then if a patient needed to reschedule or cancel, the patient had to pick up the phone and dial, right? So you're telling the patient, I'll send you a text informing you something, but if you want to inform me something, you got to put the effort of picking up the phone, right? Which is where we realized that that's why there were so many no-shows. So what we said is that, hey, you just need to change this. Make it easy for the patient to get back, as easy as you're making it for them to receive this information. Why don't you make it equally easy for them to send back some information to you? The moment we switched it to a two-way communication, that you send a reminder and they can reply to that, confirming or saying, I need to reschedule, the no-show rates went right below 10%, right? Because now it was so easy for patients to just reply back saying, hey, I need to reschedule, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I think a lot of it, Emma, is like we kind of need to change our mindset to be like, it's okay to text. It's okay to communicate through text messaging. It doesn't have to be a phone call. How can someone figure out their no-show rate? I know like a lot, maybe a lot. I remember when we used to work in the practice where it was like, okay, the no-shows are a lot, but we only felt like it was a lot when no-shows were happening. Right.
Right.
I don't know if we had a lot or a little, but how can we figure that out? The no-show rate percentage.
So sure, it really depends on. I'm sure. I don't know if is your question mostly from how can we look at it inside a practice management software?
Yeah, because when you said 30%, I was like, oh, it sounds like a lot or a little. I don't know. You know what I mean? And then I was like, oh, maybe I think any type of no-show percentage above, like, you know what I mean, double digits would be a lot. It would be a headache. So yeah, I guess you're right. Through the practice management software, it will let you know, right? And then from that point on, yeah, that's an alarming number. Above
Yes.
above what, in your opinion, what's an alarming number? Above what percentage?
I'm overly optimistic, so I would say that any no-show shouldn't happen, right? But realistically, that's not possible. I would say if you're in the 5 to 10% range, you're still okay, because last-minute cancellations happen. People have a life, something might happen, personal work might come up. You got to live with that, right? But anything else outside of that, if you don't have systems in place, or if you're thinking whether I should spend a couple of $100 on this or not, you should definitely do it, right? Because even if you spend $200 on this, and even if one patient basically reduce no-shows for even one patient, you still get back that money, right? So I would say anything above 10% is alarming.
Yeah, awesome. And then one thing I noticed also that Emitrr does is an active waiting list, or it helps you create that. What is that?
So there are multiple ways we solve this problem, right? Basically, what we realized working with practices was, and this joins into keeping your schedule full, right? The third goal.
Mhm.
And of course, handling the problem of no-shows. Now, no-shows are going to happen, right? People will say, I had something come up, even if it's not by intent or even if they forget, right? What we thought is that, hey, okay, we are able to reduce no-shows by 90%. So now you have just 10% no-show rate. What else can we do if a no-show or a reschedule happens last minute, right? Can we still bring down this percentage, right? You want to make your business as ideal as possible. So what we did is we created a waiting list system where you can keep adding people if they say that, hey, I want to know if an earlier schedule opens up, right? Maybe because they are booked 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, right? What they can do is the moment that happens, let's say I tell the practice last minute that, hey, I cannot make it tomorrow. They can easily look at the waiting list and send a text to everybody saying that, hey, we have an opening. Do you want to come in earlier, right? And that'll help you fill your slots at least today, right? Otherwise, you lose business today. And then when you reschedule this current person, you lose business twice because now you're rescheduling them to another slot where someone else could have come in, right?
Mhm.
So that's really what we do. And that's essentially what the waiting list is about.
Gotcha. And you've seen that work really well?
Absolutely. Actually, the idea for that came in from a very different capability, right? Uh, what we heard from customers was that, hey, this is one of the problems, but another big problem that we face today, right? If there's a weather change, if one of the providers calls in sick, now not only does it happen to patients where something happens in their life and they don't come up for the appointment, it can happen to a provider as well, right? They may have something personal come up, so they may want to cancel their day, right? A lot of our practices came back to us and told us that, hey, we spend so much time informing patients about a schedule change. We pick up the phone and dial. We pick up the phone and dial, right? If they don't pick up, then you still got to pick up the phone and redial, right? Because now it's on you to inform them. So what we did is we just text enabled their schedule, right? And we text enabled, what I mean by that is now they can go into their schedule, select a specific set of patients and send them a text with a click of a button, right? Or they could simply, go in there and say that, hey, send a text message to everybody scheduled the entire week saying it's bad weather. Imagine you were in Florida, right? And you say, hey, because of hurricane, we need to reschedule, right? Instead of dialing these 50 patients, you just tell the system in one click, send a message to everybody, right? What we started to see was customers were using this to fill in slots, right? They saw that there's an empty slot and they would go into the next week's schedule and text message everybody saying that, hey, we have an open schedule. Do you want to come in, right? So both the ways we saw that this worked very, very well.
Okay. So you saw like the office manager was like, fill it. The office manager saw that there was missed appointments and then they would just use that to message the patients, basically.
Exactly. And then we interviewed them and built the waiting list.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So real quick, Anmol, in a nutshell, what does Emitrr completely cover?
Sure. So just to, I always tell our customers that we help you achieve these three goals, right? Keep your schedule full, keep your patients coming back, so be able to retain with patient recall, hygiene recall, and keep acquiring new patients, right? Now, to be able to achieve these goals, we call ourselves a patient interaction and engagement software, right? So any work that your front desk is doing manually today, even for example, let's say we heard from practices that, hey, we do send text reminders, and if someone doesn't confirm, then we pick up the phone, right? So we said that, no, you shouldn't pick up the phone even then. We'll send out a voice reminder, right? For people who've still not confirmed the day before. So I would say that, we are a complete automation platform and we automate repetitive tasks for the front desk, be it anything, asking for reviews, sending reminders, following up on no-shows, birthday wishes, things like that, and allowing you to communicate one-to-one with patients as and when needed. So a complete interaction and automation software is what I would say we are.
Nice. Awesome. And so like, I know a lot of today we were talking about no-shows, and that's something I think everybody listening to is like, we really want to minimize, eliminate that as much as possible, bring it down to like the 4%. So that would be fantastic. But guys, like, as you can see, Emitrr does a lot more. And their link is going to be in the show notes below. But before we say goodbye to Anmol, where can we reach out to you if we have any questions, concerns, things like that?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to reach out to me is just text me. We use our own product. So just text us on 210-941-4696. We can also share it, along with the recording, or just reach out to me on email, right? Anmol@emitrr.com. And, I'd be happy to chat and see if we can help you in some way.
Awesome. So guys, that's going to be in the show notes below as well. And Anmol, thank you so much for being with me on this episode, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Michael. The pleasure is all mine.